I'm Ashton Smith.
And I'm Jordan Long.
And we're coming in hot. We're seventh generation entrepreneurs with a passion for fusing creative expression and business fundamentals to help entrepreneurs powerfully expand their companies.
Legacy Creator is a show for creatives, big thinkers, and visionaries who are doing business differently. Together, we unpack topics to help you embody your creative identity, develop as a leader, and powerfully grow your business.
In a nutshell, we're calling you out and calling you higher. Okay, Corina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you. And I was telling Jordan before recording, we've been connected for a really long time.
Yeah.
How far back do we actually go? 2018?
A really long time. Maybe like 2017, because we were connected on my old account and I stopped using that account in 2019. And I feel like we were connected for a while before I stopped using it.
Oh my gosh. I know that was like back in my publication days for the Authentic Woman.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot you did that. Yes. I know. We've been Instagram friends for so long. And I was thinking of that before hopping on too. I was like, wow, I feel like I know you and I feel like we've had conversations. I think we've sent voice notes and stuff, but it's so funny. We've never actually like real time talked, but I feel like we have.
Yes. And the evolution of both of us personally and our brands over those years is just crazy to see. So when we were thinking about guests for season 2, I told Jordan, I'm like, you got to know this girl, Corina. We've got to have her on. We're catering to the creative entrepreneur and you are just so immensely creative. All of your content on socials, Jordan and I are just like, what is she doing? She's so cool.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Just
thank you.
And of course, we're going to have all of your links in the description so people can go check your workout. But today I'm really excited to just provide a platform to really peel back the layers of you and your journey as a creative entrepreneur, and an artist. And so I really just want to set the tone for people that don't know who you are, don't know your brand. Can we just rewind and do some storytelling? Share a little bit about your story. How did you get started in your journey as an artist, and what has led to the creation of the company you have today, which is Wild and Free Jewelry?
Yeah. It's so interesting to reflect back because I feel like I sort of just fell into this. I wasn't really planning on making it my career. I started when I was 19, and how I categorize the official start is I made an Etsy shop with the name Wild and Free Jewelry, and it was just for fun. And I didn't really think anything of it. I just kind of wanted to create a little virtual space with my creations and my photography. And it just sounded fun to me to just list things online. And so that's how it all started. And within 4 days of making my Etsy shop, I had my first sale. And then I just kind of fell in love with the entire process. I kept doing it all throughout college. It got so busy at points in college that I would have to shut my Etsy shop down so I could study for tests because it was taking over my life. And so by the time I graduated college, it was very evident oh, I could make this my career if I want. But I never set out to make it my career. It just sort of happened that way. And it was so natural and it felt so right that I just kept following it. So it's really interesting because it was never a conscious decision, this is going to be my career, up until it became so obvious that then I was like, oh, I think I could do this. And at that time was sort of, the dawn of Instagram and Instagram influencers and all of that. So I started blogging alongside of the things I create. And that sort of created this whole lifestyle where I was able to travel and work with other brands while also doing my own creative things. And so it sort of just took over my life. And here I am 13 years later, still doing it. And yeah, I'm super grateful. It's a dream come true. I think everything that I've done is stuff I'd want to do in my free time anyways. I mean, that's how it started. It was for fun. And so the fact that it became my career and became my entire life is just really incredible. I'm so grateful every day that I get to do it and that it's been my full-time job for so long.
Oh my gosh. I'm curious, at what point did you transition to full-time in the business?
I would say after graduating college. So I had a full-time job in college. I just worked at Free People in the retail space. And so it was just, like a retail job, but I was working there full time. And my Etsy was basically full time and my college was full time. So it was like very, like, I don't know how I even did anything because thinking back, I'm like, I don't even know if I slept just doing everything was so much. But by the time I graduated, that was, like, okay, college is done. Now I can kind of think like, where do I want to go with my life? And at that point is when I decided to go full time. So it was really only a few years in that I decided to go full time with it and that I could support myself. So it happened really quickly. And I would say within the first year, I already was making like more than my like full time job at a retail store with minimum wage, So it wasn't too much of a scary decision because it was so obvious that I just was like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Talk about a sign. I think what is so unique about your journey as it compares to some people present day is that you were just pursuing your passions and there wasn't so much pressure on it to make it a
Yeah.
thing, to make it a business. And I
Hmm.
think that's a testament to your growth and how quickly that happened and how bought in people are to your brand because it's about the craft first.
Yes, totally. It was never like, I want to have a business or how many things can I sell in this one specific trend. Like, still today, everything I make is just things that I like. And I don't extrapolate too much off of that. Like, if something is selling really well, then maybe I'll make a different version of that. But for the most part, like, my strategy, even with marketing on the social media, is just to be myself and to do the things that I liked and to share what I like. And very, very rarely, if ever, do I think about like what someone else will like and how I should present myself that way.
Oh my gosh, Jordan. That's like what we were just talking about. We were batching episodes yesterday and we were just talking about just the concept of like creating from within and authenticity and not worrying so much about perception and strategy because I think that you lose some of your like creative integrity and
Yeah.
freedom in that. And when you
Hmm.
lead from your craft and your creativity and people feel that and they buy into that 100%.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I feel like the biggest wake up call for that with me, because the things I make has always felt that way. But like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of my Instagram was fused with this like blogger lifestyle. Like I kind of was taking on the role of an influencer before there was the word influencer. And in that aspect of my life, like sort of trying to market myself in a way to sell other people's stuff, that's when I started really feeling like the pressure of like trying to keep up and trying to do things a certain way. And I felt horrible. Like it just didn't feel good. And using that account started feeling really draining. And I think that's the biggest lesson in that is that my art always was like, I want to share it because I like it. And when I was trying to be like a personality or like an influencer blogger person, it felt like there was all this pressure to conform and to be a certain way and to like, make sure engagement was good. So I sold things for other brands and that just like felt so draining. Like I just totally lost myself in it. And ultimately that's why I decided to stop doing that part of my job. I just was like, I don't even want to do this. Like it's just not making me feel good.
Mm. And I love just that word conform. I feel like so many people in the industry, we end up getting to a place where you feel all this pressure and you end up
Mm-hmm.
conforming to the standards, what everyone's doing, what, everyone says
Yeah.
you should do. And that's just exhausting. Like talk about some of the resistance we already experience in our creative pursuit because we're creating something. And so then add
Mm-hmm.
on top of that the pressure to create according to other people's rules. That's so
Yeah.
tiring.
So tiring. And it takes like, I feel like true creative expression is like our self-expression. So when we're trying to do that in a way that makes others like someone else happy, it's not true because like we have to come from ourselves first. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of like there's a medium point with business and creativity where that can get really like mixed up because you want to be successful at business, but you also want to stay true to yourself. So there's like this weird balance you have to find that you don't get too lost on one side of that.
Yeah. And I know we want to unpack that so much more in this episode. That was one of the kind of like one of the questions we have for you, but let's shift gears a little bit towards more of the business side. Jordan, you want to take this one over?
Yeah, 'cause I was curious, like, what it's been like for you to build an audience of people like wanting to buy your art. Like, what created the growth for you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. I at first, since now I've had two accounts, right? So like I've kind of grown accounts at different eras of Instagram. And like the first era was like the dawn of Instagram. So I feel like that was kind of like I almost feel like I was just lucky, like I was just at the right place and right time. And the first account, because I was also blogging, there was a lot of cross promotion with other accounts. And I think that really brought a lot of people to me. But then this new account, I just completely started over and tried to do it from the ground up by myself without that. And I think the account I have now has really come from like me learning to just be myself through video, because that was something that was really hard for me, like especially coming from like a blogger life where I was kind of used to like, making the perfect image of myself. So learning how to just be myself on video and like not conform, like realize like, oh, I can just be happy and giggly like how I am in real life, and that's going to be okay. Because for the longest time I thought I had to be serious and try to be like, I don't know, just like how I see other people. But I'm not really like that in real life. Like I'm very playful and giggly. And so learning how to just like translate that in a video, I think has been really helpful and helped bring like a true connection when I connect with people through my art. And that's been like so awesome because it feels so aligned compared to previously when I felt like I was trying to only share certain aspects of myself.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like
Yeah. And
all about being like who you are, you know? I feel like that
mhm.
authenticity, like people just so resonate with it and they love it.
Yeah, totally. And it's hard to do that sometimes because we have so many narratives in our head, about like how we should be or the way we see other people doing it. But I think the more we can learn to just be like how we are in real life through a screen, I think that's what translates the best. And people love that. It's like meeting a friend. It's like, it's just so nice to connect with people in that way. And I think that's what social media should be, like us really connecting with each other.
Mm.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we show up with so much pressure for growth when it's really about the
Hmm.
depth of connection. And if you
Yeah.
have that depth of connection, even with a small community, it compounds and it's like a ripple effect over time. So that's truly the most important thing. And I love too what you said about just being at the right place at the right time. And I was thinking about how, in order to do that, you have to be showing up and kind of posturing yourself for that opportunity. Like, you never know
Hmm.
when a break is going to come, you never know when
Yeah.
momentum is going to take off. But if you continue to show up and create and be you, like, you never know.
Yeah, 100%. I like think about that so much. Even the account I have now, so like my first account, I was posting like 3 times a day for like so long. And that just, I think, was the way it grew. But this account, I post on my grid like maybe once a month, sometimes once every 2 months, like hardly at all. And that has still worked for me. Like it just is about like making sure when you show up, it's the like instead of like putting so much pressure on yourself to like constantly keep up and like crank things out. Like I feel there's a way to do it where you can still go at your own pace and still be at the right place at the right time.
That's something we talk about all the time is like, how do you balance consistency, the concept of consistency, and true creativity? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
that in our day and age, we often don't take enough time for the creativity. We're just focused so much on more, 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 new, new, new. And then you
Mm-hmm.
don't have the chance to fill your creative cup and then actually create something that is of depth and substance and true to you. So I love that, like figuring out what works for you. And I know it, at least from my perspective as a consumer of your content, it looks like you use stories a lot on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram more so than you use the grid, and that works well for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, totally. I feel like stories is just so low pressure. And like it also is like I don't have to put, you know, as much thought into the production of it. It's just like, oh, here's something I made or here's what I'm doing. And it just feels a lot simpler. Whereas like when I do that approach on my grid, it doesn't really land as well because I feel like people resonate most with like something that's more put together, like a storyline or like, a beginning of the process and the end of the process, which takes more time to make. like I'm still learning how to make reels. So I feel they take me like a really long time. Like some of them take me like 7 hours to put together because I have to go through so much footage of making something that takes like 50 hours to make. So it's like really hard to like condense that into something that is digestible for people that have, we all have such short attention spans. So it takes a lot of thought to do that.
Oh my gosh, so true. And we always
Yeah.
say for people that ask us, like, how are you guys putting out so much content? I'm like, well, we've been at this for years. And I think at some point, like, it kind of becomes second nature, certain forms of
Mm-hmm.
creating and sharing on social. But then also there's two of us, and like we're both full time. And a big portion of like Jordan's role is content and creation and production. And it's a huge ordeal. It's a huge
Mm-hmm.
endeavor. So it's picking and
Totally.
choosing like what are the elements that you want to pour your, everything into. Like we put on these fun creative campaigns and those we spend so much time on,
Mm-hmm.
but then we might put out a bite-sized piece of content that took no time to put together but still brings value. So it's
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what works for you and how to marry both worlds. But I do know our audience is going to be wondering because our space, it always says like the more you show up, the more you're likely to land sales and get paid. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an element of truth to that. But I think people are going to be
Mm-hmm.
wondering, okay, you're posting once in your grid, like a month. Okay, well, like where are
Mm-hmm.
your sales coming from? Like how
Mm-hmm.
do you continue to like bring customers in?
Yeah, I know it's so interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot because I think the top advice I hear when I watch social media tips is to be consistent. And I have not been doing that. I'm really bad at that. Like sometimes I don't check Instagram for a month. Like I'm just like not in that at all. And I was wondering, like, I think that there is a lot of truth to it. I also think it depends on the business you have, right? Like my business, it's not like Instagram is only where I get my customers. Like there's Pinterest account going that just is naturally getting stuff all the time without me doing anything. Etsy is like there's just people on that platform all the time looking for the types of things I make. So I'm not as reliant on social media for my income. Even some of the months that I don't post at all are some of my like best sales because I just have a really like specific type of thing I make. So I think that helps like focusing on, building out like your SEO and things like that helps a lot. And I will say when I do post, it's something that, has a lot of depth and information. And so often what will happen is like every few reels, a reel will go viral. And then it goes viral for like multiple months on end. So then I don't really have to post again because there's just so much traffic coming in constantly. So I feel like that has been really, really helpful. And I don't know if I'm just lucky in that way. Like it just keeps happening over the last like 3 years that way. But that has saved me a lot of work in like worrying about being consistent. And for so long, I would beat myself up like I'm not consistent and I'm bad at this. But I realize it's working for me in the way that I'm doing it. So I kind of just accepted like, I don't think you have to always be consistent. Like maybe it's like whatever just you can manage, especially when like for me, I'm, creating things. Most of my job is like making the orders that people place. So every day my hands are busy. So I can't really do much social media stuff anyways. So I feel like that's kind of the way it's like fit into my artist life is like the bulk of my life is creating with my hands. And then when I can find the time, I share what I create and it just happens to work out like really well, really well. I'm not sure why.
Oh my gosh, I think there's so much strategy behind that like you might not even see. And I think it's also a testament to the fact that you've been at this for like 9 years. That's what you said?
13.
13. I don't know where
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
nine.
Well, I started when I was 19, so maybe that's where you got the
Okay.
9 from. Yeah.
That's where I got the nine. So you're 13 years in. And I think people sometimes, you have to take the context along with that. It's
Yeah.
like you've laid so many foundations over the years. You even shared about the personal blog style page that you ran. And I know you
Hmm.
grew your audience so much through that, figured out it's not
Hmm.
the best for you, but it's so cool how that season still served you. you in
Yeah.
growing, in building your audience. And all of these seeds that you've been planting have like led to this point. And I think there's so much intention behind that. And it's picking and choosing where you want to be present, because some
Hmm.
people don't want to have to rely on social in order to
Yeah.
your business. And, you know, there's a very true reality that you don't always have to. You know, I love that
Hmm.
like Pinterest is there, you're planting seeds, and like that's continuing to serve you over and over and over again without you having to be on stories every single day. Not everybody wants to do that. And it's cool to
Yeah.
know that you have the choice, you have the option. It might take you some time to get there, but you
Hmm.
have that choice. What if you could turn your ideas into actual profit for your business? Right now, you may feel like you're doing all the right things, and yet your efforts aren't creating more money for your business. Today, that changes. Our free 90-day profit planner has helped hundreds of creative entrepreneurs transform their income goals into an actualization strategy since 2019. You can download yours for free today. Just visit myawakening.co/profit. That's myawakening.co/profit. Now, back to the show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really nice to know it's working out like that. And I think a lot of artists feel that pressure of like, oh, I already am like a full-time maker. I'm a full-time customer service. I'm a full-time photographer. And now I have to be a full-time social media strategist too. Like it's so much when we're a one person team, it's like so much to think about. So the fact that it is working out like this for me, I feel like should be hopeful for other makers and artists. Like you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to be like constantly there. You can take a break and like it might seem like you can't in your head, but I would recommend just like trying different avenues. Like Pinterest is incredible because things just keep going. You don't even have to like do anything, you know, like you can link it to your website and it just like people pin things and it just links back to you and it's so simple. So I feel like there's other things besides, you know, the stereotypical ways we think about that can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think another huge testament is just how true you've stayed to you and your work. Your work is so unique and it's so
Thank you.
specific, like you said, for a very specific buyer. And I think that that served you so well because you're not trying to be something for everyone. You're just
Hmm.
creating from within you. And it's a very specific creation that speaks to a very specific person. And that naturally takes off online.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like that is a strategy, but I have not been like thinking about it at all, you know? Like I'm just like this is what I like and I'm going to do it. And I think that's also the beauty of what I've learned is like I try to stay in the action as much as possible. Like if I start over analyzing and getting more like detached, I guess, where I'm like, "Oh, what should I do?" I really try to get out of that and like turn something into action. Like as long as I'm doing instead of like thinking and analyzing, usually that serves me better because it feels like lighter and there's more of a momentum going.
Yeah, Jordan, you were just talking about overthinking on our account today, but I think so many creatives struggle with that, just being so in your
Hmm.
head and like overthinking all of the things and all of the options and what you should be doing. When if you would just choose one and like move, you would
Yeah.
feel so much better.
Totally. What it's like analysis paralysis, I think I've heard it
Yeah.
called. Like you just there's so much and then you don't do anything because you're like, I don't know what to do.
Yes, so true. So for someone that is like a creative to the core, I want to know what your take is on just the creative process itself,
Hmm.
whether it's for your craft or it's for social. Like, what is it really like to create? Because I think sometimes in our world, we have a perception of what it feels like, and it's all sunshine and rainbows all the time. But I'm curious from your perspective, what is it like for you?
Yeah. I think for me, creativity has been like incredibly healing. I view it as a space where I can be sad and I can like be in my emotions. And a huge part of why I keep coming back to creativity throughout my life is because when I was younger, I struggled a lot with depression, and being able to be creative has healed that part of me where I can now like look at the world and think it's magical and full of love and opportunity. Whereas like before, it felt like the world was really heavy and black and white and it felt really hopeless. And so it's kind of always had that space for me where it like alchemizes these really heavy emotions and turns it into something really light. And so even if I'm going through something, I look forward to working because it's a space to be by myself where I can create and like process what I'm going through. So I think it's a tool for being present and like really learning to be with these heavy things, these like very real things that have to do with life that can be hard to confront. And it helps us digest that and then turn it into something that is like tangible that we can share with people. And I think that's like one of the most beautiful aspects of everything. It's like it's a safe space to feel these things that feel so heavy, but then it's also like healing because you learn like with that heaviness there's also these beautiful aspects of life and there's growth and change and like then there's connection with other people. And I feel like it's been this sort of like inward exploration of myself, but also helps me trust myself to get through life and get through like really hard moments. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it almost feels like it's a representation of life itself, you know, just like growing up and evolving through things. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that that's like what my job is because it feels incredibly uplifting when I get to work because it's like a space for me to really be with the inner parts of myself that I think are really easy to ignore sometimes. And it's really helpful to really know those aspects of our inner world, you know?
I love that you said it's a tool to be present. That's so good. And I think some people may subconsciously resist delving fully into their creativity and the creative process because it's going to bring that level of presence and maybe
Yeah.
some of those emotions along with it. And it might not always be like joyful emotions. It might be sadness or grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like a lot of the things I've dealt with that have been hard are like my own insecurities about like, you know, worthiness. So it's like I go to sit down to create something and maybe a narrative comes up that like, oh, I'm not good enough to make this, or I'm not going to be like talented enough or something like that. But like sitting with that and being like, oh, interesting. Like, why do I have that? And just kind of like letting the process, you know, unfold. Then you get to the end and you're like, oh, wait, I did do that. Like, but I had to have the awareness to like let the action unfold instead of just getting in my head and saying like I can't do it. You know, there's so many things I've had to teach myself throughout the years to like keep this business going. Like even just being able to talk on camera, I didn't know how to do that for the longest time. I'd get so in my head and be like so nervous. And now I can do it because I practiced, but I had to have that presence of mind to be like, why do I think this about myself? Like, can I evolve through this? Like, you know, let's try to like heal these things, these limiting beliefs that I have that are keeping me stuck. So yeah, I think it's a really, really beautiful process. And I think it's very helpful if we can be aware of like what narratives we have that are holding us back from our creativity. Because I think a lot of times those narratives are like exactly what we need to heal, and creativity can help us heal through them.
Yeah. And I think not everyone is like willing to go there when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to like sitting with their thoughts and sitting with how they feel. I mean, our world is designed for us to just not have to feel anything ever. You
Mm-hmm.
know, our world is designed, it is full of distraction. But I think
Yeah.
that that's so special that you shared that the creative process, it like calls you to presence and it calls you into a deeper level of awareness with yourself, because when you're creating a lot of times like you're alone with your craft and you're alone with you.
Yeah.
And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's so beautiful. I think too what's probably helpful is how you don't put so much pressure on your creative process either. And I think at this point in time you're so fluent in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But even thinking back to those like early days, I mean, maybe that this has always come natural to you, but I think a lot of times people place so much pressure on their creating and their,
Mm-hmm.
craft, that it just becomes a process of like overwhelm and overthinking versus actual.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the creative process itself has always felt natural to me because it's always felt safe. But I think what is hard most of the time is believing that like my human form can carry out the idea I have in my head. So I'm like, oh yes, I want to be creative and I want to do this and I'll start doing it. But like sometimes when I go to share it, there's a little bit more of a like can I do this? Because it's like then reliant on like how I can talk or like, my editing skills or something that has to be more like a translation of it online. And I think that's when I can be more critical and like hold myself back more just throughout time. It's definitely so much better now. But for a long time, that was like something that was super hard for me, just like being able to like stand next to my art and be like, I made this. Like making the art was never hard. That's the part I like love. But then sharing it with people can be a little bit scary because you're like all of a sudden connected to what you made. And that can feel like really weird.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Like so, so good. It can feel so vulnerable to like own your
Mm-hmm.
creation and to show up and in our world, like market it. And that's a
Yeah.
whole other level of vulnerability.
Yeah, yeah, that's always been the part for me that I think I hit the most obstacles, but I like am willing to go through them. Like I really believe the things that we're afraid of often are the things we need to do. And I think like I'm trying to, get to that point where I don't even think about it anymore. Like it's just so second nature. And I'm really like close to being like that all the time. But occasionally, especially if I have a new idea that I want to do that I've never done, like I launched courses last year and that was so hard. Like trying to talk for like an extended period of time on camera and like teach something was so hard for me. So I think that there's, aspects that can be really challenging with as we grow, but I think it's supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to be like just, I don't know, no tension the whole time. Like I think it's designed to help us level up over and over and over again. So I think I approach that with like trust in myself. Like I'm going to do this and my creativity is going to like help me get there. Even if it's hard, I like still want to try.
Mm. I think so many people see tension as a really bad thing. Like, I somehow
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this thing. It's hard. There's resistance. But I think
Yeah.
it's just a natural part of the creative process. And we have to be willing to like move through that to get to the other side where there is a lot more ease. Like you even mentioned with showing up on camera, like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that once felt hard. Same for me. And now it's just second nature, but we would never
Yeah.
be here if we didn't like move through that tension.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's a balance too of like knowing the type of tension, right? Because if there's a certain type of tension that's really like hurting your soul, then yeah, you should not be doing that. But if it's like a tension that is more fear based and it's like you're in your heart, you want to do it, I think that's when you confront the tension because there's obviously you don't want to always say like do what scares you or do what brings tension because that could be something toxic. So there's like a little bit of a balance of really knowing what's in your heart and knowing what you want and then just like that's the end goal and you just do everything to try to get there. Like that's the direction you're moving instead of like just being like oh this is hard, I'm going to give up now even when you really want it.
Mm, yeah, like having that level of awareness to be able to distinguish between the two, I think is so
Mm-hmm.
important. So we've kind of peeled back the layers of creativity and like what that feels like. But Jordan and I definitely wanted to hit on like creativity and business. So Joe,
Mm-hmm.
you want to take over this question?
Yeah, I'm curious to know what it's been like for you being a full-time artist and making a living from that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
is that ever uncomfortable or feels like really vulnerable or scary?
Yes. I think in the beginning, since, I mentioned I was 19 when I started, I didn't really have a concept of like, how many hours are you working? How much do the materials cost? Like, I basically would make something, look at it and be like, I don't know, this feels like it should be $20. Like, I didn't like think about a strategy with like money at all. And only up until probably around the pandemic, like in 2020, 2021 was when I started timing myself and I started like really being like, okay, I want to get paid an hourly wage. And like, I want to be able to like, not feel like when I do my taxes, I'm like, wait, this makes no sense. Like I just had no form of business structure for most of my career. And I was able to support myself. Like I was able to do the things I wanted and like able to travel, but there wasn't like a sense of like, is this economically feasible? Like it was just like, I want to make this and like I'm making money and that's cool. But then sometimes I like do the numbers and I'm like, that was not smart. Like I was working like, sometimes I would not sleep. I would literally work from morning until like the next day just because I had so many orders. I was trying to get so many out. And I never thought like you're working like way more than someone at a regular job and not making like as much money. Like I didn't even put it together because I loved it so much. I was like happy to not sleep. So now I really have more of a formula where I'm like, okay, I pay myself an hourly wage. I like, here's the cost of materials. And that makes it easy because I think it can be hard pricing our work. But when you look at it as you would look at it as like an actual business, like how long did this take? How much are materials? And then can you like make this again? What about the photo shoot? What about the marketing? What about the skills you had to teach yourself to do this? Like there's so many things that go into it that we don't realize when we're just creating, because that's like the fun part. So I've definitely had to teach myself the more logical business sides of it. And I think I'm still learning that, like still learning how to make smart business moves and like think about things in that way. It's definitely not natural for me. Like I've had to teach myself those skills and they're very, very recent.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's such a good point. I feel like so many creatives, we think that because something comes easily to us or it's enjoyable, that
Yeah.
somehow should make it less valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I even see this in like my industry, like even with coaches or service providers, like when things come easily to you because they're a strong suit, you can tend to like undervalue them. And when they're
Mm-hmm.
fun, you're also like, well, that was fun. I don't really have to charge that much for it. But if
Yeah.
you're trying to make a living from your art and make it a business, there's like a whole other element that you have to consider. It's your livelihood too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think that narrative of like, I like this, like, don't give me money is like what I was stuck on for a very long time. And it took me a very, very long time to realize like, oh, I could like doing this and make money and like thrive, not just struggle. I think that I was so okay with just like having just enough to pay for everything that for the longest time I never questioned that because I thought that was kind of like what you get when you decide to be an artist. Like, oh, like you're just going to struggle and that's part of the narrative. So I wouldn't necessarily say I was struggling, but like I definitely had just enough to do everything and pay all my bills. Like that's kind of what it was like for a very, very long time. And it took me so long to realize like, oh, I can thrive as an artist. And it was really hard to get to that point mentally. Like I remember when I listed my first jacket, that was like not $400, which back then they cost like $250 to make and I was charging $400 and they took like 50 hours to create. So I like did not put any thought into that. Like I just was like, I'm just going to make back the materials and like a little more and that's fine with me. And it took so long to just understand like you don't have to do it that way. Like you can do it in a way where you're supported and you don't feel like burnt out and you can like, people are going to meet you there. And that's still something I'm like working on. Like I'm at a better place with that now, but for so long I felt super uncomfortable to like tell people my prices because I just like felt like I wasn't used to seeing artists that charge things like that were, at like a level where I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. What would you say like gave you the courage to actually start charging more and welcoming like more wealth into your life that was
Mm-hmm.
more than like just enough and like just scratching the surface?
I think I just, well, I mean, I think obviously the world changed a lot with the pandemic, and I think that really made me like reflect and it just getting to a point of realizing like it could be different. Like I think I was so in one mindset that I didn't even know there was another option. And when I started like I would get really burnt out because as I mentioned, I used to like often I would not sleep. I would like have so many orders that I felt like I couldn't sleep and I would just like do them all until like midday the next day. They'd all be done and then I'd go to bed. And I was doing that a lot to the point where I was like, why am I doing this? Because I was starting to feel like, exhausted and like a little burnt out, which isn't something I was used to. And so I think there was like compounding things kind of happening that made me realize like I gave myself this job and I'm setting the prices. So like, why am I doing this to myself? Like I'm almost like it's like I don't believe that I can do it a different way. And so I had to really like trust like that there's another way to do it. And it's been such a long journey, but it's so amazing because last month I realized like now my jackets are so much more than they were. And last month I realized I have more orders and jackets than I've ever had before. And they're the most expensive they've ever been. So it's like such a testament to what you believe is possible, you know? Like I just didn't even think that was possible before. Like if someone said like this is how much you're working, you should charge this much, I would be like, what? That's crazy. No one would buy a jacket for that much. And now I'm like, no, they do. And it's
Oh,
nice because I'm not like burnt out.
yeah, that's so good. Like you will never know unless you ask, unless you try, unless you do the thing. I love
Mm-hmm.
that so, so much. And I even think, back to my journey and my story, there's just so many times in business where you find yourself doing things and you're like burning out and you're like, this isn't actually what I want. This isn't
Yeah.
sustainable. This isn't like, why am I taking on all of these calls or all of these clients? Like, I don't have to do it this way. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we're just going through the motions. We lose sight of
Yeah.
what we actually want. And I think sustainability is so important, especially like for you, as a creator, as an artist, like
Mm-hmm.
you are required to bring the work to life. And like the same is
Yeah.
true for everyone listening to this podcast episode. And so it's like, how can we make your work more sustainable so that you can keep moving forward, that this can continue to be your livelihood? You
Mm-hmm.
feel like alive and fulfilled because like that should also be a part of it too. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm curious, just kind of with your journey, like, did you end up scaling back your like your turnaround times or like how did you curb some of that like with the high
Mm-hmm.
demand that you had?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I just want to say sustainability is a perfect way to think about it. I think for the longest time, I didn't even have that word in my mind. Like, because everything was happening so fast, it was like I was stuck on a treadmill and I was just like trying to figure it out. And I didn't even think about long term. Like, that is super, super important. Like, if you, especially if you're like, doing it on your own, like you're dependent on yourself to make ideas happen. So I feel like one of the main things that helped was just like, I don't know, sort of like reflecting on exactly what you said and then realizing like, okay, I'm going to have to change like the pricing of stuff I already have, which was already like, that felt so scary. But there was a lot of orders I was getting of mermaid crowns, for example. And that takes like 5 hours per crown to make. And so I finally realized like, okay, all these designs that are selling, I just have to raise my prices. And that is really scary, but I did that. And then, the orders would go down, but then I would get an order that felt more worth it because it was actually paying me properly. So I think that helps sort of like mitigate the surge that was going on. And it just sort of made it more feasible for me to like work in a way that was healthy for my body and like my mind.
That's so good. And I think sometimes you may have a quote unquote sacrifice in, let's say, volume, but if you are being paid more of an accurate figure for what you're creating, and then you're also feeling like I have proper sleep and nourishment and I feel good
Mm-hmm.
and I have space to create these things in, the time that I need, that's going to feel so much better than this high volume and staying up all night
Yeah.
creating.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so funny it took me so long to realize that. Like, I think I just have felt so grateful and it was happening so fast that I didn't even think about like, could this be better? Or like, what ways can I like change this? Like it was just such a like a whirlwind that I didn't really like even have time. I was just like trying to get stuff out the door and like make things as fast as possible. And having that little part of my brain that sort of like went out, like zoomed out and thought about the bigger picture was so helpful because now I'm like so much less stressed. Like, and I don't think I realized I was stressed. I like felt grateful. So I don't think stress was even like part of what I thought was going on because it just was so fun. But I was stressed out. Like my body was super tense. I like wasn't sleeping right. There's all these symptoms of stress. I just didn't realize that's what was going on.
Mm, yeah, sometimes we just have to slow down long enough to assess how am I feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Is this working? What
Yeah.
can I adjust to feel better? Like sometimes we really
Mm-hmm.
have to slow down and have that awareness. So that's so
Yeah.
powerful. One of the things that Jordan and I have talked so much about just over the last few months, I would say the last 3 to 6 months, is the power of just showing up with your like unique and creative voice, especially in an online space that is like forever growing. There's so many people there. It can feel so saturated. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that I feel I just value and respect so much about you is how much you are dedicated to who you are and showcasing that through your craft. And so I wanted to know if you had any advice, you know, or anything you could shed light on when it comes to like finding your voice and your creativity through your art. And like for somebody who's really wanting to find their voice or their style and show that online or through their marketing, like what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think that a lot of it for me, and I think everyone is different, but for me, what really helps with that is solitude and alone time. And obviously that comes with creating for me because I don't have a team, I create by myself. So I've spent like a lot of alone time throughout my life with my craft. And I think that has helped build this sense of self and confidence that is very clear to me. And everything I make is sort of a form of self-expression. It comes from this space of like wanting to create something magical and like feel that childlike sense of wonder. And it's like all from a space of like being a kid and that like magic I felt then. So I think that is also like a core component of who I am, that sort of like inner child that I like really want to nourish. So I think the most powerful thing anyone can do when they're trying to, you know, figure out their style is just getting to know themselves, like spending time with themselves, investigating why they do the things they do, the thought processes they have. Like all of that is what I do when I create. And I think it's helped me really feel like grounded in who I am because I'm so clear on, you know, the things I think and the things I value. And I think that's really powerful. That's like, you know, when we meet people and we become friends with them, that's what gravitates us towards them is like how they show up in the world. So I think the more you can learn to just be as more yourself as possible, then your style just follows like after that because your style is you.
That's so good. Solitude, like space. And I think, again, our world is designed for us to never have that. It's
Yeah.
easier to never have that.
Yeah.
And even being in the online space, there's always something new to learn. There's always someone saying something, and there's always a new
Mm-hmm.
trend and a new thing going on. But Jordan and I talk about that all the time. Like, when are you alone with your craft? Like, when we think about some of
Mm-hmm.
the biggest name artists that we like so love and aspire to be like in so many different fields, they had a ton of alone time with their craft and they were dedicated to their craft. And I think that's something that's so lost so often in our current world because there's so much
Mm-hmm.
distraction. But I think that's one
Yeah.
thing that you've done so well, and it shows through the quality of what you create.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really hard to turn off all the distractions. Like I have to have tools in place that help me do that. I don't have notifications on my phone, even text messages, like I have to go to my text messages to see if there's text messages. I don't have any Instagram notifications. I also do like phone detoxes like where I don't use my phone for a few days. Like I have to do stuff like that constantly to help me feel that space that I need to like be creative, you know? And it's hard. I feel like my brain is used to like reaching for my phone and checking things.
Oh yeah. It's like you have to work at it. You have to have boundaries. Like I have
Yeah.
no notifications. Well, most every day I have my do not disturb on, but like for
Hmm.
socials, there are no notifications on my phone. Otherwise, I would go crazy. And you know,
Yeah.
my friends and family have the expectation that I might not text you back right away because I'm not always like attached to my phone. You have to
Hmm.
have some of these boundaries to just like feel sane and like enjoy living. But, you know, especially when it comes to creating, to be able to just be with you and your thoughts and to not allow your voice to get muddied in what everyone
Hmm.
else is saying and doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's with creativity, but also just like being a human in regular life, you know, like there's a lot of pressures on how we should be, how we should dress, how we should look. Like there's so many endless things. And I know like you've spoken about that so much, just like the pressures of like even just being a woman and like how we need to show up. And like, I don't know, I feel like it's really nice to just like liberate yourself from that and just be like, yeah, we can just be who we are. We don't have to like try to fit into this box. Like I think people really want to hear that because everyone is exhausted of trying to fit into a box all the time.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Like, just forget the boxes. Like, don't
Yeah.
try to fit in them. Like, people are also so drawn to people who know who they are. Like, there's just a sense of like groundedness and power in that,
Hmm.
versus someone who's just trying to be everything for everyone. Not to mention, it's just so exhausting. It's just
Yeah.
not
It
sustainable.
is exhausting. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This was so incredibly valuable, Karina. Like, thank you
Yay.
so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I was so happy when you asked that I would do this.
Oh my gosh, of course. Well, we're of course going to have all of your links in the description, but what's the best way for people to discover you and shop from you and all the things?
Yeah, so the main way is probably on Instagram. Wild and Free Jewelry is my handle. And then my website is wildandfreejewelry.com. But I'm also on Etsy, same handle.
Amazing. We will have it all linked. Thank you for your time and your energy and your presence. Like, you are so sweet. And I can just feel
Oh,
that like through our conversation. And this is going to be so valuable. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in today. We hope you'll go connect with Karina and yeah, purchase something from her shop. Go like peruse all of her incredible work. And that's a wrap for today. We will catch you in the next one.